Alright, I know some of you have been waiting for this one. In this hand, we have the Control4 Halo non-touch remote, brand new this year. In this hand, we have the Control4 Halo Touch remote. Yes, I've had them both for a few weeks now. I've been kind of trading off and using them intermittently, mostly in the living room to control Apple TV and some Kaleidoscape as well. Between these two remotes, I will say in either case, spoiler alert, you really can't go wrong. I think they're both really exceptional. They're both a large step forward for Control4. They both completely and utterly destroy the Control4 Neo remote in terms of quality and operation, and I'd be happy with either one. And so you know up front what you're kind of looking at for these as well, if you're buying them, or a bunch of them perhaps for your household. The non-touch remote, MSRP about 500 bucks. The touch remote, MSRP, as of now, as far as I know, about $900. So there is a pretty considerable price difference between the two. Comparison point number one, let's talk about features. It's kind of like style, fit and finish, and that sort of thing. For the more expensive remote, the Halo Touch is advertised as being basically an aluminum type style finish. The non-touch remote it's kind of like a plasticky finish. So in some respects, yeah, you're at least getting a little bit more premium of materials, a premium of a fit and finish for your dollars over here with the touch. Side by side, you can see there's a pretty significant button difference between them. The non-touch has 3 programmable hard buttons at the top that the touch lacks, because you would do all of your conditional programming stuff on the touch screen itself. The touch also lacks the number keypad. All of those number buttons, the info button, and the color button, which really cool, actually activates the color combinations of the keys that they're on. I think that's pretty nifty. That's the main difference between the two. The touch also gives up that top row of buttons. See, we start there with back, kind of like home and menu, whereas on the non-touch, we have an extra row of watch, technically home, and listen. And again, you need hard buttons for this on the non-touch for operations that you would do on the touch screen with the touch itself. Weight-wise, heft-wise, and all that, they actually feel pretty similar, even though the non-touch is actually larger. But I will call out this height difference, right? That's what we're looking at there in terms of a height difference. And that's pretty considerable, I would say, in terms of having the remote be wieldy in your hand. I feel like I have more thumb access, I guess, to all of the buttons around this remote, where on this one, you really, if you're going to get to the numpad or you're going to get to the very top, you're going to be shifting around quite a bit. With the trade-off being on the touch, you will be shifting up very deliberately to hit the touch screen and the options that are within it. Although I would say generally when you're using the touch remote, you're probably not using the touch region and then shifting down with your thumb. You're probably holding it in a hand, you're using your thumb for the hard buttons, and you're bringing that other finger in there to operate the touch controls. Whereas over here, you don't have a reason to kind of bring the other hand into play, and you're kind of basically using this one, predominantly to me, one-handed. Now, the extra height really does make a difference as well. I've been using the non-touch for the better part of this year, actually, including the wintertime where it was colder. So laying on the couch, you got a blanket over you. This thing can kind of get caught up and just get in the way a little bit more because of its length. Maybe I just have limits with regards to the length that I'm actually able to handle before it gets unwieldy. Again, they both do have that like contoured back where your index finger just rests so nicely. Buttons are distinguishable, although given that there are so many buttons on the non-touch, I'm still finding a little bit of points of confusion between like finding where the transport controls start versus being up above them versus being down in the number pad regions, where over here you can kind of in the dark more find your place a little bit easier directly from the bottom. You're right into the transport controls, which is probably likely going to be a set of buttons that you use more often, as opposed to the number pads, which quite honestly, I really haven't found much of a use for in terms of controlling my devices, although I did actually treat them to some extra programming in the room. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on too. So all in all, in this category, if I had to give a final vote of fit and finish, form factor, features, and all of that, I have to say that I think I really do prefer the touch. So we're talking about advanced home automation control systems here with Control4. And the whole reason to buy into a Control4 automation system and put a remote like this in your hands is because you have a whole bunch of stuff that you want to be able to control, and you want to be able to do it in a powerful way. And you probably want to also be able to customize quite a bit of the things that you would be controlling. Now, in my living room, on the non-touch, I have a couple of specific hard buttons defined there to control my fireplace, which isn't accessible yet that I've been able to discover in any other way. The comfort controls haven't been added yet in the firmware that I have, as well as basically some macros that I programmed into my Control4 system to do some game mode settings and stuff on my LG TV. In the theater, I actually used the hard buttons for the lens memory recall, so I can change my projector from 16:9 to 185 to 235 very easily right on the screen, and I really do like that. Now, they are supposed to be adding some extra power to these buttons, one of which would let you make them contextually sensitive to the room that you're in. Right now, or to date, programming these buttons, it's universal, meaning you had been able to program them for the remote once and only once, and those buttons stay in that configuration regardless of what you're doing with it. But I hear they're supposed to be adding capability, or it's coming soon, or might just have gotten there, where you can make these room contextual. That's awesome. Way back to when these were announced, there was also some thought or some pre-announcement that there'd be like a flyout menu. You could press the button, you would get multiple options, and you could use maybe the D-pad to scroll between and select one. That would be fantastic. Haven't seen it yet, so Control4, if that was just a rumor, I highly suggest that you consider that as a feature. Given the fact that we have 3 buttons, and that's really what we have access to, you know, with the non-touch, you are functionally limited in that regard. But if you want to go for far more programmable customization, the touch is really where you want to be. So if I go to my home screen here, we can see there's a functionality in Control4. It's called a custom button agent. I actually have one of these defined for the room, and they're that same game bar, game mode, fireplace, and other controls info in that case. But you're able to make a variety of custom button agents, each containing a number of individually named, customized named, and macroed programming responses to each of those. You have more control over the order of how things are presented. You can favorite different things to the screen. I have the ability here to, of course, swipe around between the different elements of control. Conceivably, as much as there could add more programmable features to the non-touch, we could hopefully see and benefit from even more programmable flexibility and customization on the touch. So bottom line, if you got a whole lot of things, a whole lot of operations, custom type of operations that you want to have access to, then you're probably looking at the touch to enable that a lot more easily. If you only have a limited set of programmable customizations that you want to have access to, then here you go, non-touch serves its purpose there. Now, I did make 2 videos using the non-touch remote, one focused on the Apple TV, another focused on the Kaleidoscape, talking about how I had basically laid out the flexible programming of various operations for both of those devices. I added some functions to like record and DVR and other buttons that specifically didn't have a purpose for either an Apple TV or a Kaleidoscape. You're perfectly able to accomplish the same thing over here. I do miss the info button. I like info buttons, and I like having them available as a hard button. I wish there maybe could have been a way to find an opportunity to get an info button over here. But I have to be quite honest, for the Apple TV, there's no use of the number pad. For the Kaleidoscape, the number pad only really has value in one specific UI where you're looking at your movies in a list, and it's basically like a T9 jump list. So what I actually was using the number buttons for in both of the rooms was programming other operations. Essentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in my living room puts my lighting into one of 6 different scenes. So it's cool to have the buttons to be able to do that. However, over here, again, you could have just used a custom button agent and had much more direct accessibility to any of those lighting scenes with legitimate names and identification. Over here, I'm often left wondering, wait, was 1 or 3 the dim or the bright one, and the family certainly would never operate any of those number pads without some kind of a written out key or legend giving them the clues. Over here, they could absolutely hit a custom button that says lighting agent and be able to pull up a specific scene. Now, one of the operative questions that folks probably have is, what's the battery life? I think ultimately the battery on the touch burns out faster than the battery on the non-touch, but I would still classify neither one of these remotes as being particularly good in the battery life department. You should just safely assume that if you're going to buy and use either one of these in any regular manner, have the charging base handy somewhere and just plan to plug it in every night. Start your day, start your evening, start your use case of your theater room or your living room or whatever it might be with a full battery. There's been a number of times where either one of these has sat out what I would consider to be just a little bit. Go to pick them up and it's either really low or just flat out, all out, battery's gone and the remote is unusable. Got to put it on the charger. Now they do charge up reasonably fast, but again, you'll just save yourself a whole bunch of trouble and hassle if you just make it handy and leave them on the base when you're not using them and make sure that you charge them up every night and they're always going to be there for you, full on and ready to go for a multiple hour movie watching session or binge watching session or whatever you might be doing. Beyond that, a lot of the base operation is really parallel between these. The voice control options are the same. I like being able to access Siri on the Apple TV, particularly for my favorite "What Did They Say" command when it rolls back and enables the subtitles if you missed a certain piece of dialogue in whatever it is you're watching. There were a couple other nuances that we've noted when I was doing the live stream and setting these up, and you can kind of even see here. We'll dim the lights a bit and show, but the non-touch actually comes out quite a bit brighter in its backlighting in its default state. These are both configured right now to the same effective brightness setting number, but for whatever reason this one comes out brighter. I think maybe they toned the touch down because the brighter it's running the buttons, the more battery it's probably using, and certainly this touch screen is taking more of the battery life. The screen segments of these remotes is not created equal. The non-touch I think is a 2.8-inch screen and the touch is a 3.2. You get quite a bit more real estate and I think that makes it nicer as well. One other real interesting kind of functional difference that I noted between these as I was using them is that, of course, because the non-touch does not have a touch screen, whenever you're controlling something that's on the screen, of course, you're using the D-pad, you're pressing the main button there, like the enter button, to access it. So basically, again, you're controlling the options on the screen with the D-pad. And I think over the period of time of just using this one, I became very trained to do that. Whereas if I go, say here, note the D-pad has no control of the options on the screen. So whenever you see something on the screen and you want to actuate it with the touch remote, you are only touching it. I can't tell you how many times I went to do something on the touch remote, say watch, and I want to get to the kaleidoscope, and I went to doing this, pressing down, pressing OK, or I hit the top button on the remote to turn my system off, and I just wanted to click on the OK button in the middle to accept the prompts. And what was happening, of course, was I wasn't controlling what was visible on the touch screen. I was controlling what was happening on screen. So I was actually doing things on my Apple TV while I was trying to shut the system down. It really becomes second nature to me using the non-touch to have menus and options and things pop up on the screen here and use the D-pad to navigate them. It might have been nice, I think, maybe nicer perhaps, if in fact with the touch remote you were able to either touch things to actuate them, or when something, say, touchable or selectable is on the touch screen, you could actually use the D-pad to move around and use the OK button to select it. I think it would have enabled some better continuity between the two remotes, particularly if you have a household where in one room or another you may have a non-touch, in one room or another you may have a touch, because your muscle memory, I think, may stand to get confused swapping between them. Mine certainly did. So I think that's about it. You'll find a lot of other similarities between these remotes. The tops are the same, the bottoms are the same. I love the continuity that they both basically come with the same charging base, which means if you have mixed remotes in the same household, you can charge any remote on the same basis. That's all interchangeable. Thank you, Control4, for thinking of that level of interoperability. At the end of the day then, which one of these might I be keeping? Might I do one or the other, keep one of each and use them in different rooms? The price point being almost 2x is pretty considerable difference. I would like to see maybe what else possibly feature-wise may come to either one of these in the future. That could make one perhaps more interesting than the other. I do really like the idea of being able to access multiple custom button agents as maybe I add other things to the system, perhaps a video processor or something else along those lines, which may have very specific command and control requirements that I would want to use the Control4 remote for. The more stuff that you have, probably the more likely you are to end up, I would say, preferring the touch. If you had a MadVR or something, maybe you would want to have a custom button agent and a whole bunch of like specific MadVR modes or callouts or something to be able to command and control that device or certain elements of it with ease. I could see that being quite a bit harder to accomplish with the non-touch. I can say that by and large as well, the feedback from the family is that they never really liked this one. The kids especially, they complained about how big it is, and they complained about how many buttons there are. What do I do with all these buttons? I think from a family acceptance factor, the touch has a little bit of a benefit there. Granted, my family particularly may be a little biased in that regard because we did use the Neo for so long. So using the touch screen and having an interface that's set up very similarly to the Neo probably makes more natural sense to them. So keep that in mind, whereas with this one, they had to kind of learn a little bit more and make some adjustments in terms of how they're using it. And even just for the purposes of the channel, it may actually make sense for me to just have one of each anyway, so that when new features come along, new capabilities come along, and all of that, I would be able to experiment with, demo both of them, and make future content about it. So to take my needs as somebody operating a channel like this with a little bit of a grain of salt in terms of following what I do or what my recommendation might be. Although I have to say, all else being equal, YouTube Techthusiasm channel aside, I would probably feel myself a little bit more drawn to wanting the touch, quite honestly. So that's my comparison, that's my hot take. I'll probably make a separate standalone review of this to exist in line with the former review I did of the non-touch Halo. Check out that video if you want to see some more detail. Check out the other videos where, again, I did the programming kind of deep dive about using this remote with Apple TV and Kaleidoscape. Most of what is in there applies to the touch as well. Stay tuned for more Control4 content, and let me know what you would like me to talk about. What can I help you with? What can I demonstrate, show, and teach with regards to Control4 system control and home automation? Otherwise, if this video helped you, hey, leave a tip, Venmo and PayPal, leave a super thanks. I very much appreciate it. If you're shopping for Control4 automation and help, I have some really great integrator friends of mine that I can recommend. If you're shopping more in general, hey, Audio Device and Amazon, use those affiliate links down below. Otherwise, please do all that regular YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, hit the bell, share the video, leave those comments, let's discuss, and come on back for more home theater discussion, home automation discussion, and fun.